Well, Harvester, it's good to see you. We are in week number 2 of the series that we are titling Selfless, where we are talking about what it looks like to be a people of Jesus who are not selfish, we are selfless, which means we think less about ourselves. We put more energy into others and raising others up than into ourselves. Last week we talked about what would it look like if we talked about ourselves less and we talked about Jesus more. Like, what if that's what we were bold about? What if we were vocal about Jesus more than ourselves? Throughout this series, we're going to talk about some other things. We're going to talk about what does it look like to serve others more and ourselves less? What would it look like to give more thanks and more gratitude? Today, I want to talk about giving, which is everybody's favorite topic. But we're in the season where I think it's important to talk about giving because we are in a receiving mode right now, aren't we? A lot of the holidays that are coming up are based on receiving. We've got Thanksgiving coming up where we receive lots of food. We've got Christmas coming up where we receive lots of gifts. We just have Halloween where we just receive lots of candy. In fact, I discovered something about my son this Halloween, that he is a grabber, not a giver. Anybody else have children who are just grabbers, not givers when it comes to Halloween? We took my son door to door in our neighborhood, which is always good when the pastor shows up at your door knocking. You're like, no, sorry, no tracks, no, we just want candy. That's all we're here for. Knocking door to door, and he, instead of being like some of the cute little kids, they hold their bags and they're trick or treat. Like, I'm just here to receive whatever you want to give. My son's a grabber. He knocks on the door, trick or treat, what you got? And he just starts grabbing handfuls. You can put that sign out there that says take one only, but take 2 or 3, that's what he's going to do. He's a grabber. That's what kind of person he is. And I think it might be just the culture of our family. I think it might be our fault that he's that way because I'm also a taker as well. For example, how many dads here charged the dad tax when it came to Halloween candy? Any dads there like, I know you earned that, but I'm going to show you how the world works, and I'm going to take a percentage of your candy and eat it for you. That's what we do. Moms, though, they don't do the dad tax or the mom tax. What moms do is they just take the candy and give it away to other families. How many of your moms did that? You're like, that's too much. You can't have that much candy in here. We're going to donate it. We're going to give it to the school. We're going to take it to work and put it in the bowl out front. We're that way. We take and we take and we take. And I wonder if many of us are actually selfless givers, selfless receivers, or if we're selfish givers and selfish receivers as well. I wonder if we take that kind of giving mentality into our normal lives. When we grow up, we're typically still grabbers, aren't we? I mean, if we're honest and truthful about the way we approach life, typically most of us, we are grabbers. There's this passage in Proverbs 21 that puts it perfectly. It says this: some people are always greedy for more, but the godly love to give. Some people are greedy for more, but the godly love to give. I wonder if you were honest with yourself, which mentality would you fall in? Are you the kind of person who's like, I just need a little bit more. I just need a little bit more. I'm just going to grab a little bit more. If I can just get a little bit more, I want a little bit more. And we grab when we approach this world and we approach this life. Or how many of you are like the godly who just love to give and you're like, whatever I have, it's just yours. Whatever I have, it's somebody else's. Whatever I have, I want to bless somebody else with it. Typically, we approach it with one of those two mentalities. And when you look at the scriptures, you see that mentality coming up throughout the entire book, both Old Testament and New Testament. What I want to do today is show you the two mentalities for giving that we see in the scriptures. One is a selfish mentality when it comes to giving, and the other is a selfless mentality when it comes to giving. The first image that we see is in the book of Haggai, and it tells us that one of the mentalities for giving is this, that we are people who like to fill holy bags. Fill holy bags. And by holy, I don't mean like holy of God, set apart. I mean like holy, there's holes in it. That kind of bag. Like when it comes to giving, when it comes to receiving, we approach this world like there's not enough. It's this selfish mentality where it's like, I got to get more because there's really not enough in the world. Unless I grab it, then I'm going to go without. So I need a little bit more to fill my bag. I need a little bit more to fill my bag. I need a little bit more to fill my bag. My bag is not filling up. Why is my bag not filling up? It feels like I'm putting everything into a bag with holes in it. That's what God tells the Israelites in the book of Haggai. Haggai was a prophet in the Old Testament, and God gave Haggai a word to say to his people, and this is that word. Haggai chapter 1, verses 3-6. It says this, "The word of the Lord came by the hand of Haggai the prophet," and this was the word of the Lord. "It is time for you yourselves to dwell, or is it time for you yourselves to dwell in your paneled houses while this house lies in ruins?" Now, this house that he's talking about there is the temple in that day. At this time, the temple had been destroyed. The house of God had been destroyed. That was the church of the people. That was the center of the community. That's where they got hope from. That's where they worshiped from. It was laying in ruins. The bricks were knocked over. And then God looks at them and says, "Is it time for you yourselves to dwell in paneled houses? These nice houses that you're building up, you got siding on the sides of them. You're focusing on building up your houses while this house lies in ruins?" And then he goes on to explain the result of that. He says, "Now therefore, thus says the Lord of hosts, consider your ways. You have sown much, but you've harvested little." Why is that? "You eat, but you never have enough." Why is that? "You drink, but you never have your fill. You clothe yourself, but no one is warm. And he who earns wages does so to put them into a bag with holes." Essentially what God is saying is, why don't you evaluate your mentality when you approach giving? Why don't you evaluate your life for a moment? You're putting all this effort into building up your home, building up your life, building up your accounts, building up your life to look really nice on the outside, but for some reason, even though you keep sowing and the harvest is coming up, you still feel hungry. You're putting clothes on your back, but it's still that those clothes on your back is still not enough. It's like you need more clothes in the closet. You need more in the bank account. You need more paneling on the house. You need more food, more drink. It's almost as if you're earning wages and putting them in a bag with holes in them. What God is emphasizing to his people here is this, that when you start with you, instead of starting with God, you'll never be satisfied. When you approach this life, you approach giving and receiving, and you start with yourself, you will never be satisfied. You will earn more and more and more and more and more. You will get more and more and more. You will have more and more clothes, more and more food, more and more house, more and more houses. And it'll still never feel like enough because you started with you instead of starting with God. That's a scarcity mentality of giving. It's a scarcity mentality of receiving where we say, there's just not enough. And that scarcity mentality is a mentality of giving and receiving that comes out of fear. Because it's this fear that I've got to get what I can get right now because someday that's not going to be enough. Someday that's not, so grab what I can grab right now because in the end it's going to disappear. Some of you are getting ready to go through that very feeling at the Thanksgiving table. When you go sit with your families, remember that growing up? Like the table was just full of food. We had turkey, we had green bean casserole, mashed potatoes, we had onion pie, we had cranberry sauce. Full table. As soon as the prayer was said and amen was said, what happens at the table? Scarcity mentality. Like, grab what you can grab because it's going to disappear. I got to get it. Like, I grew up in a big family with a lot of kids, and so we approached every meal like that. Grab what you can get now because there's not going to be seconds. Like, it's all going to be eating. We've got to grab before it's gone. But the problem with grabbing is that when you grab, there's never going to be enough. Grabbing is like filling a bag full that has empty holes in it. Let me give you an image of this. This is how we approach a lot of life. We look at life and we're like, there's a lot of life to grab and to hold. And so the way we approach life is we're like, I'm going to grab. And the more I can grab, the more that I'll get. But the problem with grabbing is that grabbing is like filling a bag that has holes in it. The more you grab, especially when it comes to like sand, what happens is you can't help but it falls out of your fingers. And some of you, this is how you're approaching life, and this is what you feel like right now. You're like, I need a grab, but I grab and it seems like it disappears really fast. If I just got a different job, then that would be enough. But you get that job, and what happens? All that you've earned seems to go away. Well, if I just got that raise, if the boss would just give me that raise this year, then, or if I just put a little bit more in my savings account, or if I put a little bit more in my investment, but it keeps falling out. We earn, but then we put it in bags with holes in it, and it keeps falling out. I think what God calls us to do is to approach life from a different posture. Instead of a posture of grab, 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 what if instead of this posture, we approached life like this? A giving posture. A giving posture is a posture of open hands that says, maybe there is enough, and maybe it's okay that I give first. I honor God first. I care about other people first. And when you do that, what you see is that when God begins to give to you and fill your hand, it doesn't leak. It doesn't come out as much. That there is enough. It's not a bag that has holes in it. There is the ability to retain. There is the ability to give as well. But that starts with changing our posture. So the more selfish you are, what we learn in the scriptures is the less you have. And I really believe that's true. The more selfish you are with life, the less you have. And the more selfless you are, the more you end up having. There's a second mentality that we see in the scriptures. It's not filling holy bags, it's filling holy barns. This mentality of filling holy barns that are blessed by God, if you want to have a barn that's blessed by God, it starts with this mentality, that there will be enough. There will be enough. I wonder how many of you are approaching 2023 with that mentality. There will be enough. God will take care. Right now, most people in our countries, there's this fear hovering over our country that's like looking ahead at the world and the financial situation ahead and thinking, what if there's not enough? What if there's like, grab all I can get right now? Grab all I can get right now, because what if there's enough? But what we see is that when we approach with a selfless mentality of there will be enough, what God does is he makes enough for you and for the people around you. Proverbs chapter 3 says this. It says, honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of all of your produce. Then your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will be bursting with wine. Honor the Lord, and your barns will be filled. Honor the Lord, and your barn will be blessed. Now, this passage comes from an Old Testament principle that's called the law of gleaning. The law of gleaning was this idea that, well, you guys know that most people back in the day, the way they made their living was through agriculture, through farming, right? And so they would sow the seed, and then the seed would grow up, and then what would they do with that crop? They would harvest it. And where would they put that harvest? They would put it in their barns, right? Now, the mentality of the day is, we're going to sow seed, we're going to sow as much as we can so that we can take care of our family, take care of ourselves, and then when it grows up, we're going to harvest it all and put it in the barns. But then God introduces this idea, the principle of gleaning, the law of gleaning, where he tells them, what I want you to do is not harvest all of the field. Leave part of it untouched. In Leviticus chapter 23, this is the law of gleaning. It says this in verse 22. When you harvest the crops of your land, do not harvest the grain along the edges of your field, and do not pick up what the harvesters drop. Leave it for the poor and the foreigners living among you. I am the Lord your God. All right, two important things there. Number one, leave the crop on the edges of the field. Don't harvest it. Number two, know that I am the Lord your God. Those two things are emphasized because of the mentality that the Israelites brought and the mentality that we bring to income or work or even giving, as we say, I've got to grab and hold on to everything. I've got to grab everything so that I can fill my barns. My job is to fill my barn. So I'm going to seed, I'm going to work, I'm going to put on the hard work, and then I'm going to get it all. I'm going to grab it all and put it in the barns. But then God comes along and says, here's what I want you to do instead. I want you to plan to live on less, knowing that there will always be enough. When you sow the seed throughout the year, plan on not reaping what grows on the edges. Plan to live on less, knowing that there will always be enough. Essentially what God is saying is, I want you to trust me, that I am your God. I am the Lord your God, not the field. The field isn't your God. The field isn't providing for you. Your work isn't providing for you. The seed that you planted is not providing for you. I am the Lord your God. And the thing that I find interesting right now is we're in harvest season right now, where just countrywide there's just a harvest going on. That's why we celebrate, the fall season. That's why we celebrate Thanksgiving. It's because we're in a harvest season. But the thing I want us to know at Harvester is that at Harvester, we don't harvest at all. At Harvester, we're not a people who tries to fill our barns up. At Harvester, before we fill our barns, we fill other people's bellies. That's the mentality and that's the approach that we bring to our faith. Before we fill our barns, we fill other people's bellies. What God told the Israelites, he's like, before you fill your barns, obey this command. Let other people glean on the outer edges of the field. And so I wonder what God would do through Harvester if Harvester was a giving people and not just a grabbing people. Like imagine if every single one of us, we lived our lives that way. Of saying, God, I trust that you are going to provide. That if I honor you, then you will bless the barn, that you will make the barn holy. That there will be enough for me and my family, even whenever I leave, for those who are in poor situations, for the poor, for the foreigners in our land. Last year, whenever we launched Give Hope, that was the idea that we came in with. Of what if during the harvest season, this season here, before we go into Thanksgiving, before we go into Christmas, what if we gave? What if we saw how generous we can be? And I wonder what God would do if we were a giving church. And so that's why last year we were able to give almost $750,000 in 1 year. It's because we are a people who believe that before you fill your barns, you fill other people's bellies. Now, the question is, how is that possible? How is it that this group of people was able to give that much? You know how it's possible? Because you have approached giving with open hands instead of grabbing hands. One of the joys of last year was watching how you gave, who gave, and the heart with which you gave. We had so many households that gave. So many households gathered together and said, before we buy Christmas presents, before we put food on the table, what if we made a commitment to give to someone else? To give outside of our household, to give outside even of our church household, and you gave. But not only that, we also saw businesses give last year, which just blew my mind. The fact that it's not just people personally giving, but many of you who own businesses and run businesses and have ties in businesses said, you know what? I want God to not just bless my household, but I want God to bless my company, my business. And so we're giving personally, but businesses gave last year from their income. We had people who gave off of their interest on investments because they wanted their retirement to have that blessing over. We had kids who gave their allowance. In our kids ministry, they've already started Give Hope. They always lead the way for us giving first. Last week, one kid brought his entire allowance in and said, you know what, I want to give towards Give Hope to help somebody else instead of spending it myself. We had teenagers who don't make a lot of money, but they gave, and they gave generously. And you know what we saw God do? We saw God bless our barn. Man, this last year was a great year at Harvester. It's a year that our team has been looking back on saying, man, God moved in some incredible ways. And I think it's because we started with this mentality of saying, God, we believe that there's enough for Harvester Christian Church. Therefore, we're going to give and give away more than we've ever given. And what we saw this year is that God blessed. And he blessed in some really incredible ways. This year, our baptisms this year are up significantly over last year, which means people are receiving the gospel because we're approaching God with that kind of heart, like a gospel-centered heart, and people are being baptized. Not only that, but this year, the number of guests and people who came to Harvester for the first time up significantly, which means new people are hearing about the gospel. But then we were also able to do some renovations in our kids ministry area, in our student ministry area. And God's like, because you're blessing out there, I'm going to give you the opportunity to bless the next generation that's coming up and do some renovations in the kids ministry area. In a few weeks, those of you who have kids, you're going to be blown away by what your giving was able to do outside of the whole Give Hope thing. And the reason we were able to do that is because I believe God is blessing Harvester, where even what you guys give weekly outside of Give Hope is up as well. which means we're able to provide ministry and better ministry to you and to your families and to the issues and the struggles that you're going through as well. I think when you give with this heart that says, God, there will be enough, what you find out on the back end is there was enough. Now, some church traditions, here's what they'll say. What you need to do is you need to give so that God will give to you. I don't believe that. I don't believe that God is like he's tricked into making us rich through our giving. But I think what God does is he blesses you when you give. He blesses your household when you give. He blesses your business when you give. He blesses the barn. He makes the barn holy. The reason we give is not so that we can get in return. The reason we give is because we love people. The reason we give is because there's a need. The reason we give is a way to honor God through worship. It's not some little trick. If you give, God's now going to have to give to you and bless you and make you healthy and wealthy. That's not why we give. We give because we love. We give to give. And that's what Give Hope is about. Give Hope is about giving hope to other people and seeing what God can do for that. So here's what I'm going to challenge you in the coming weeks. I want to give everybody a Give Hope challenge, and it's this challenge. It's not a dollar amount. What I'm shooting for, this is the number I'm shooting for Give Hope. 100% participation of everybody at Harvester participating in Give Hope. 100% participation. That's a number that I'm tracking. That's a number that I'm looking at during the Give Hope season of asking, what's the percentage of harvesters that participated in this? That's the number that I want to grow. Because I believe that whenever we give, God does something incredible in the world around us. It unleashes this hope generously in the world around us. And so I'm asking for 100% participation. Now, some of you give every single week. You give every single month. You are a tither. You follow the biblical principle of tithing where 10% of your income goes to God. It honors God to begin with. Here's what I'm asking you still to do. I'm still asking you to participate in Give Hope, which means this. If you're like me and you tithe, to give above and beyond that. Here's what I'm not asking you to do. If you give regularly, I'm not asking you to take what you regularly give and stop giving that so that you can give to Give Hope. For me, that's not really that extra heart of giving. It's diverting. It's really a method of saving. I'm saying if you give regularly, what can you give above and beyond? For some of you, you're brand new to Harvester Christian Church. We've had so many guests and visitors this year, and you've jumped in when it comes to the worship. You've jumped in when it comes to this time here. Maybe you've gone to Belong. Maybe you've jumped into a group, but giving's not something that you've done yet. Here's what I'm going to challenge you to do. Make Give Hope that first step of giving for you. To say, I'm going to try giving. And I'm going to give generously, knowing that during this Give Hope, it's going to go outside of these walls to make a difference. Give Hope is a great time to start giving. Some of you, you're online right now, and you're like, does this really apply to me? I'm not really sitting in the room. Here's what we view you as. We view you as a part of Harvester Christian Church. And so I'm asking you to participate as well. Whether you're watching it live right now, we get a lot of people. Many of you are listening to this podcast later in the week. You're watching the YouTube video later in the week. You can participate as well. We want 100% participation. I want to be able to stand before God and say, look what all of your people did. It wasn't just one person or one household or one business that bore all the burden of this, but every single one of us jumped in some capacity. So here's what we're going to do. On November 20th to 29th, we're going to open up our Give Hope Fund. And my prayer is that we have 100% participation. So what do you do until then? Here's what we're asking you to do, is to start praying today. Start having conversation today. Start looking at your barns today. Start looking at your fields today and praying over them and saying, God, what is it that you want me to give for the benefit of someone else? And I'm going to ask you to pray that. And I'm not asking you to pray that because somehow that benefits me or this church or our programming here, because it doesn't. Every dime that you give to Give Hope goes to somebody else in need. And I want to be a church that loves the lost and wounded and that unleashes hope generously. I started this service off by reading Proverbs 21, talking about two kinds of people. Some people are always greedy for more, but the godly love to give. The question you might have is, why do the godly love to give? Have you ever met someone who's just a giver? Have you ever met that person who's just like, man, they give so much and they're so generous. I'm guessing those kinds of people stand out in your mind. And often, when you hear about those kinds of people, at their funeral. That's when you get to hear those kinds of stories. This last weekend, I was at a funeral of a beloved member of Harvester Christian Church, Jerry Reynolds. Many of you know him. Many of you showed up to his funeral. And just to hear story after story of this man who, you look at him and you're like, he's happy, he loves people, he's so incredibly kind. There's this joy that's on the inside of him. And then at his funeral, you hear these stories. And it's just giving stories about how Jerry would give and bless, and he would cook for people, and he'd give and welcome people. And I just have this question, like, why do godly people love to give? What is it about those kinds of people that there's this joy inside of them where the rest of us are like, we're grabbing, and we can't quite grab enough, and never do we ever grab that joy? Why do the godly love to give? It's because I think they've discovered something that I hope every single one of us discovers. It's this, that happiness doesn't come in bags or barns. Happiness does not come in bags, and it does not come in barns. Your happiness will not come from what you're putting in a bag with holes in it, nor will your happiness come from what God is storing in your barn for you. Happiness does not come from the possessions in our hands. Happiness comes from the posture of our heart. It comes from a heart that says, I'm going to live a selfless life when it comes to every aspect of my life. Happiness grows from that kind of posture. A heart that's postured like that, a heart that's postured to give, never goes empty. And that's where joy comes from. When it's no matter what's in my bag or what's not in my bag, no matter what's in my barn or what's not in my barn, I'm not empty, that there's still enough. Many of you live that way, and you are generous as can be, and you've experienced the joy that comes from giving. During Give Hope, that's what I'm calling all of us to experience. And it's something that was exemplified to us through the cross of Jesus Christ. Here's what I want to do. I want to go into a time of communion.